Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome all of you to our annual financial aid night. I'm grateful to be able to co-host this evening's presentation with our Assistant Director of Admissions from Stockton University, Marielena Dottoli. Welcome and thank you again for being here. Just so you know, the whole session will be recorded and sent out to you. Therefore, any verbal questions that are asked at any point will be on the recording, just as a heads up. So any personal questions or information that you would like to share, we can do that separately on a separate call. The program this evening will be a brief introduction on the scholarship search process, local, state, and regional scholarships, the process of applying for those scholarships, and again, national websites and resources that you can utilize throughout your search. For underclassmen who have elected to log on tonight, kudos to you. You will have a heads up when you're a senior. You will have a better understanding of where scholarships are and how to apply for them, as they don't change much from year to year. Marielena, is there anything you would like to say before I jump into my presentation?
Just thank you so much to everybody who's joined us tonight, and I'm excited to go over the whole financing your college education process.
Well, thank you so much for being here and welcome. Students, parents, and families, put your seatbelts on. This is kind of a wild and crazy year for financial aid. Marielena and I have been in conversation since last January in regards to the changes to the FAFSA and how that may impact you as you file the FAFSA this year. For those of you who have filed the FAFSA before, this is going to be sort of a brave new world for you as well. Like I said, we will be recording this and sending it out. If you missed information and want to go back, you will be able to do so. So I'll jump into my brief portion of the presentation. I am basically just focusing this evening on scholarships and how to find them. The main resource for state, local, and regional scholarships is our Naviance program. In a moment, I'm going to log on and show you where you can find all of those things on each student's account. I do have a brief Naviance overview tutorial that's built into this PowerPoint that I'll be sending out to all the students and families tomorrow. You can go on individual college and university sites to take a look at what scholarship opportunities they offer students as well. So that's a secondary resource. So once you get that manageable list down, you can really start looking at what institutional scholarships and aid are offered. Also, colleges and universities have their own database for outside scholarships that maybe some of the other resources that you're using here don't have. And then again, our outside resources, Scholarship Owl. Believe it or not, Raise Me is one of those websites that underclassmen can start registering with and earning scholarships for grades, activities, leadership, service. Seniors can benefit from that as well. It's not too late for them as well. Going Merry is a very similar website that they can use, and recently added after I attended a NACYAC, or National Association of College Admissions Counselors training, bold.org, Broke Scholar, Chegg, and Get Schooled. So those are some other national websites that you can take a look at. I do want to encourage students and families to really focus on those state, local, and regional scholarships more than the national scholarships. We very rarely have students become finalists for national scholarships. We have a lot of success with our state, local, and regional scholarships. So this is basically how Naviance can assist families in finding money for college. They have a lot of different features in that program that I'm briefly going to highlight tonight. If you have any questions about the features of the program, please have your student or you yourself can reach out to me and I can assist them. So basically what students will do is they will open up sorry about that. How do I, sorry. You open up a new Google tab and you'll click on the waffle icon and you'll scroll down to Naviance Student. When the student clicks on Naviance Student, the following page will load. Having a tough time One moment. I'm so sorry. I don't know why the correct web page is not showing. So I'll go in another way. I'm not sure why this is not showing up correctly. I apologize for that. I'm just going to go back into my PowerPoint and walk you through the steps that way. I'm so sorry about that technical difficulty. If you follow these basic steps to get into Naviance, students will be able to access their scholarships. In the scholarship tab, the student will be able to click on scholarship search, and there's a couple different features in Naviance that I think are extremely useful. There's a national scholarship search that's linked directly with Sally Mae. And there's also scholarship search, which becomes very saturated with state local scholarships anywhere between January to May of senior year. Underclassmen can take a look at these scholarships, but they won't be eligible to apply for them until senior year. It is beneficial to do that because scholarships and deadlines don't change that much from one year to the next. So it's very important to become familiar with that feature. And there's also college-specific scholarships that are featured in Naviance. This is an excellent way for a student to put in information about themselves, their SAT, ACT, and their current GPA. Obviously, you all know we don't rank, so you would leave NA in that search block. But several colleges participate in Naviance in telling students and families how much money they would be awarded based on their GPA, SAT, or ACT scores. So that's another great feature of Naviance that students can utilize to access grants and scholarships. Also, if parents would like access to Naviance to play around with the scholarship search and any of its other features, Mrs. Dwyer, who is also our scholarship guru, has kindly volunteered to add parents to students' accounts. So all you would need to do is email her at cdwyer@ocsdnj.org with your student's name and preferred email address, and she will give you access to the student Naviance account. So there are some things to think about when submitting paperwork for scholarships. Just like students that applied to colleges this year did with their applications, they'll need to do the same thing for their scholarships. So for example, if a student applies to 30 scholarships, they need to submit 30 transcript request forms to their school counselor. And keep in mind, the transcript request form is a communication tool for the students to utilize with their school counselor. Therefore, if there's any special things that a counselor needs to do for that scholarship application, for example, they need a specific letter of recommendation or a specific essay, or they want their resume sent, they can write all over that transcript request form because only the student and the school counselor sees that transcript form. And similar to college applications, school counselors will need approximately 5 to 7 school days to process those scholarship applications. We would hate for a student to miss an opportunity to gain consideration for scholarships. And a big part of that is getting all the materials in on time and preferably early. So we just want to be mindful of deadlines and give your counselor that breathing room. If you have something unique that needs to be completed for your scholarship application, for example, if a student needs to submit letters of recommendation online, The school counselor will need to sit with the student once they've completed the entire application and then upload those letters of recommendation and submit them for the students. We do not release letters of recommendation to students. Therefore, we have to follow that protocol for online scholarship applications. The big scholarship application season, like I mentioned earlier, is February through May. However, we do have scholarships trickle in before and after that. The key is to check that scholarship list in Naviance once a week. And students do have the opportunity, as I mentioned in the former slide, to like that scholarship. They just click on the heart and it adds them that to their scholarship list. So that'll keep them nice and organized and keep them on track so they're not missing out on any opportunities. I've been doing scholarships for quite some time now, and I can tell you it is not rocket science. You know, apply for everything that you are even remotely qualified for. Stay on top of them. The students that apply for a ton of scholarships typically reap the greatest benefit and get the most amount of scholarship money. So don't be afraid to apply. Ask questions. If you need assistance, your school counselors and I, and again, Mrs. Dwyer, are available to you to assist you with any questions that you may have in the scholarship application process. I'm just about to turn it over to Marielena, and again, I apologize for our earlier technical difficulties. I will send out a video walking all the students through how to access scholarships in Naviance to better assist you, since I couldn't give you a visual this evening. Couple resources I just wanted to highlight. If you get a financial aid award letter, and Marielena is going to talk about financial aid letters in just a moment here, but there is a lot of support for families if you get a financial aid award letter and it's not matching your situation. I found this great resource, and again, this will be in my PowerPoint, Swift Appeal Assistance. There's also a great resource through our state association, which Marielena will talk about, HISA. It's a loan repayment calculator, so it gives students and families a very good understanding of how much money they have to pay per month for the next 15 or 20 years based on the loan amount that they take out over the course of their college career. And then obviously, as always, I'm available if you need an appointment or if you need paperwork, for example, transcript forms. All you would need to do is click on this link in this presentation and you'll go right to my website under college application forms. Thank you so much again for being here. Click on your seatbelts. There's so much change going on in the world of financial aid at both the state and national level. And I'm very grateful that you all were able to log in and that we have a phenomenal resource such as Marielena. So I'm going to turn it over to you and stop sharing my screen here.
All right, thank you so much, Mrs. Oves. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
How do I unshare this?
I gotcha.
Oh, I got it.
There we go.
Sorry,
You're
everyone.
good. All right, and then I am just going to go ahead and share my screen. For just a couple of housekeeping items really quick, if you have any questions for myself or Mrs. Oves during this presentation, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A, or you can put something in the chat, and then we'll do some answers at the end live. And then if you have any like specific questions or anything, we can talk either, through email or set up an appointment with either myself or Mrs. Oves. All right, so getting started. Thank you all again so much for joining us. And Mrs. Oves, thank you so much for having me tonight to go over what I would consider one of the most important pieces of the college decision-making process, and that is financing your college education. And I just want to commend everybody for joining us tonight, whether you're a student or a parent, for really understanding the importance of this process and just being here tonight. So before we get started, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Marielena Dottoli. I'm Assistant Director of Financial Aid here at Stockton University. I'm also a two-time Stockton alum. I graduated in 2018 with my bachelor's, and then while working full-time in 2021 with my master's. And I truly am very passionate about financial aid. It's funny how I fell into it. I never expected to be in financial aid at all. And then the job came about and here I am. So before I jump into the FAFSA and the different changes going on, what I like to do is just break down the whole process of exactly what we're talking about, because it can seem overwhelming and a little difficult at times, especially with all the new things that are coming. So what I like to do is just break it down into what I'm going to be discussing today. So we are going to go over the sources and the types of financial aid. So that's where your aid comes from, and then the different types that are available, how to apply for that aid, determine costs for the different schools that you're looking at, and then understanding your financial aid offer and filling any gaps there might be between your aid and your costs. Okay. So the first thing, the sources of financial aid. So this is where your aid comes from. So your aid can come from the federal and state governments, the university, the colleges that you're applying to, and then private entities as well. And these sources provide two different types of aid. They'll provide gift aid as well as self-help aid. So of course, gift aid is everybody's favorite kind. That's free money, grants and scholarships, money that doesn't have to be paid back. And then we have self-help aid. Self-help aid includes loan options. So that's borrowed money that has to be paid back with interest, and then employment opportunities. So working and earning a paycheck. Okay, so now we understand where the aid comes from. Now we'll go into some specifics of what types of aid are available. So from the federal government, they give a different range, the different types of aid. So they'll offer the federal Pell Grant, the federal Work Study Program, and then federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans. The state does mostly gift aid in the form of the tuition aid grant, the Garden State Guarantee, the Educational Opportunity Fund, and NJ Stars 1 and 2. And I'll go into some specifics of a few of these throughout the presentation. Aid from the college includes grants and scholarships. So many different colleges and universities will offer different grants and scholarships based on different things. Some are based on need, some are not. When I say need, financial need, different calculations. And then scholarships, for example, Stockton offers scholarships based on merit as well as extracurricular activity. Some other schools also do the same. Some are just based on academic merit. So you'll need to discuss that with the schools that you've applied to. And then private aid would be private scholarships and private loans from anywhere that's either offering a scholarship or a loan. That's not the government or the institution that you're applying to. I did just want to go over one state aid program that I feel is super important to note. Many New Jersey schools participate in this program. It's called the Garden State Guarantee. It's a last dollar program, which means that it covers the gap between the cost of tuition and fees and other grants and scholarships for eligible students. So there's 3 different tiers to the Garden State Guarantee. Tier 1 would be a $0 net price, meaning it would cover the entire gap. Tier 2, a $7,500 net price, so students and families would pay no more than $7,500 for tuition and fees, and then a $10,000 net price is what Tier 3 would be. Okay. The $0 net price for tuition and fees is available to New Jersey residents with 60 to 128 earned credits, whose family adjusted gross income is between 0 and 65,000. So that's where you would pay $0 as a net price for tuition and fees only. Housing and food isn't factored into that. The second tier is where you would pay no more than $7,500 if your AGI is between $65,001 and $80,000. And then the third tier is you would pay no more than $10,000 for the year if your tuition and fees, in tuition and fees, if your AGI is between $80,001 and $100,000. Now, note that this is between 60 and 128 credits. So this is typically for juniors and seniors, but I wanted to keep this in here and mention also that a lot of schools also have programs very similar to this for first and second year students as well. So at Stockton, we have what we call the Stockton Promise. It kind of mirrors the first tier of the Garden State Guarantee. So if you have an AGI between 0 and 65,000, you would pay a $0 net price for tuition and fees after other grants and scholarships are applied. So something else to just ask the different schools that you're applying to if they have any programs like that. That could be beneficial for you. If for this specific program, as well as for Stockton's, all you have to do is file a FAFSA, and then you would automatically be considered. Any NJ Dreamer students would file the New Jersey Alternative Application with HESA. Okay, I wanted to touch upon what EOF is really quickly, in case anybody thinks that they may qualify for EOF. So EOF, the Educational Opportunity Fund at Stockton, we call it an extension of family, ensures meaningful access to higher ed for New Jersey residents from backgrounds of economic and educational disadvantage. EOF students receive counseling, financial, and other support services to ensure success in college. So as I mentioned, we call it an extension of family. And there's many different benefits to EOF. Tuition and fees are covered. Students receive free college credits at our Interactive Summer Academy. This is not a Stockton specific program either. This is a state program. So each state school that you might be applying to participates in EOF. So what you would do is after you've applied or when you're applying, you would contact the admissions office at that school and let them know that you're interested in EOF. The way to apply to the actual program is to file a FAFSA, but then you do have to do some follow-up with the schools. There is a financial piece to it for a student to be considered for EOF. Gross income and assets must fall between the criteria shown below. Additional documents may also be collected as part of the verification process. So, for example, if you have a household size of 3, your gross income cannot exceed $49,720 and your assets cannot exceed $9,944, and then so on and so forth. So if you think you may qualify for EOF, I would definitely recommend reaching out to the schools that you've applied to see if they have room in their program. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about some of the different aid programs available, mostly the state programs available. Now, how do we actually apply for these programs? So U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens will file the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA, each year to determine eligibility for federal, state, and some institutional aid programs as well. So some institutions do use FAFSA data to determine eligibility for their financial aid. The FAFSA has typically been available each October 1st. However, as we know, it's not available yet. The 24-25 FAFSA will not be available until December, which is this month. My bet is on December 31st at 11:59 p.m. Because by law, it has to be available by January 1. So we'll see. I'm not sure yet, but we're already almost 2 weeks in and no FAFSA yet, no word. And we just had a federal student aid conference, no word. So we shall see. So everybody stay tuned for that. Anybody who identifies as a New Jersey Dreamer, you're not eligible for federal student aid, but you could be considered for state aid. And J-Dreamers will complete the New Jersey Alternative application at HESA.org each year to determine their state and institutional aid eligibility. The 24-25 New Jersey Alternative application will be released once the 24-25 FAFSA is released. I do also just want to note, as Mrs. Oves mentioned HESA previously, HESA also determines stated eligibility for New Jersey residents who are U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens by the information reported on their FAFSA. So HESA has both categories of students. Okay, I want to get into a few specifics of what exactly is the FAFSA for anybody that's never completed one before with maybe an older child or something like that. Or yourself potentially. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's your application for all federal and state aid, as well as some institutional aid. The FAFSA uses demographic and financial information, including household size, income, and assets from the student and family to determine a student's aid eligibility. Some colleges also use the information from the FAFSA to determine eligibility for institutional aid. So this year's seniors, the class of 2024, will complete the 24-25 FAFSA, which is the one that's not available yet. Just for going forward, it can get a little confusing because there is spring of 24 with the 23-24 FAFSA. So when you look at the FAFSA, you want to think fall, spring. So when we look at the 24-25 FAFSA, we're looking fall 24, spring 25. The following year will be fall 25, spring 26. So that's how you want to look at the FAFSA to make sure that you're doing the right one when there are multiple available at once. All right, so normally at this time of year, we would tell you, oh, you need to go and file your FAFSA right now. But like we said, it's not available yet. What's the reason for that? Something called FAFSA simplification. So currently, the U.S. Department of Education is in the process of implementing a major overhaul of all of the processes and systems used to offer federal student aid, starting with the 24-25 aid year. Okay, the goal of this giant redo of the FAFSA almost hasn't been changed for many decades. So it's long overdue, but the goal of this is to expand eligibility for federal student aid and to create a more streamlined application process and just a better user experience for the FAFSA. I have seen, and I will actually show you some screenshots of what the new FAFSA is going to look like. It does appear as though it's a little simpler, I feel, to complete. There's some good features to it that I think will actually make the user experience a little bit better. But with all of these changes, what does that exactly mean for us? The FAFSA is changing and it's going to impact everybody. So the federal government is changing the methodology of how they determine aid eligibility, what different things that they use to determine aid eligibility. They're changing the look of the FAFSA. So a lot of different things happening. So what I did was I put a few of the main pieces on the slide that I'm going to go over. So there are fewer questions now used to determine a student's aid eligibility. Previously, it was approximately 108. Now we're looking at approximately 40 questions. There are not 40 questions on the FAFSA, there are more than that, but only 40 are going to be used to determine aid eligibility. The number of students in the household and college will no longer be used in the formula to determine aid eligibility. I know this is a big one. This is a very controversial one. I can say that research done has shown that this will not have as big of an impact as many people think. So majority of students who were not Pell eligible previously, it's not going to affect them. It's going to potentially affect some students who were Pell eligible previously and might not be anymore based on that. But a lot of students who this, which the next bullet is your EFC. If you've ever heard of EFC, it's expected family contribution, is going away. They're changing that to the student aid index, or the SAI. It's an indexing number that's used to determine student aid eligibility. So they take those 40 questions now, previously 108, and they plug them into a big formula and they come up with a number. And that helps us determine how much Pell a student's eligible for, how much financial need they have, which need is not a great name. It's just a calculation that we do. So it doesn't necessarily mean how much you need to go to college. But with that said, it might increase your SAI a little, but if you were never Pell eligible in the first place, then it's not really going to make much of a difference to you. And with research done, it has shown it's really not going to impact too many families. Of course, it will impact some. Students and parents will now need to consent to have their information transferred into the FAFSA directly from the IRS. So if you do not provide consent, then the student will not be eligible for federal student aid and they will not receive an SAI. So it's very important to provide this consent. It's super easy and I'll show you how to do it. It's literally just clicking a button. So way easier than the data retrieval tool, which is that next bullet. So the direct data exchange is going to replace the IRS data retrieval tool. If anybody's had to use that before, it could be a very frustrating process. With the tool, you actually had to go out to the IRS site, and then you'd have to plug in some different information that would appear on your tax return, your filing status, your name, and your address. As we know, the IRS sometimes abbreviates things. It's manual entry, they could make a mistake. And if you didn't have your address exactly as the IRS inputted into their system, you couldn't use the tool. So it was very frustrating. This direct data exchange is clicking the consent button and it's automatically transferred into the FAFSA. So a way easier process. So that's something super helpful. It takes a lot of manual entry out of filing the FAFSA and a lot of frustration out of using that IRS data retrieval tool. So that is a very positive change. Students and parents are also going to complete their sections of the FAFSA separately now. So if you have an older child, an older sibling for students, you may have known that students would log into the FAFSA, sit with their parents, and they would all do the FAFSA in one shot together in one login. That's not going to be the case anymore. Dependent students will add their parents as contributors to their FAFSA by entering their name, date of birth, social security number, and email into the application. Contributors will then receive an email asking them to log into the FAFSA using their own FSA ID. So if they don't have one already, they'll have to complete or create one, and then they'll complete their section of the FAFSA separately. Something new that came from federal student aid recently. Previously, they had made mention of the fact that both parents would need FSA IDs. Recently, it's come about that only one parent will need an FSA ID if the parents filed jointly and they're married. So that's the only case where only one parent will need an FSA ID if you file jointly. If parents are married or unmarried and living together, both parents will need to complete this process. That should actually say if parents are married and filed separately or unmarried and living together, then both parents will need to complete the process. So the only people that only need one FSA ID if you're married and filed jointly. All contributors must then complete their sections of the FAFSA and sign it for a student's FAFSA to be submitted to federal student aid for processing. Okay, so I know that that was a lot. That was a lot of new things that are happening. Some of you maybe are unfamiliar with how the FAFSA used to be, which you're kind of at an advantage because you're not used to seeing how it used to be. So you're not automatically going to say, oh, I have to go and do this. So you might be at a little bit of an advantage over those who have done the FAFSA previously. But the first step in applying for financial aid is creating an FSA ID. If you haven't done this already, students and parents can go ahead and go to studentaid.gov and select create account and create your FSA IDs. These are your username and your password to get into the FAFSA. Okay. It also serves as your unique identifier, so it matches with your social security number. You all can do this now. The only families or family members, parents that cannot do this yet are those without a social security number. Previously, parents without a social security number could not create an FSA ID. They would have to input all zeros on the FAFSA and print a signature page and manually fill it out. And it was just a long drawn out process. So now the federal government is contracting with an outside agency to be able to verify the identities of individuals without social security numbers. So it's kind of going to be one of those things where it'll ask you questions that really only that person should know based on where you've lived and different things like that to help verify your identity. So that's something new and exciting also that'll take away that barrier for any student with parents that do not have a social security number. That will not be available until the FAFSA is released. Okay, and the next steps, of course, are filing the FAFSA. So some of the things you may need when you go to file the FAFSA. 2022 income information. So the FAFSA asks for 2 years prior income information. So 2022 1040s for the student and parent, W-2s, 1099s, records of child support received, which child support received is now going to be considered an asset on the FAFSA. Current balances of cash, savings, and checking accounts, and then the net worth of investments, businesses, and farms. So all of these things are good pieces to have with you when filling out the FAFSA. When you go to give your consent, use the direct data exchange, it's most likely going to pull in a lot of your tax information, but some things you are going to manually have to put in are numbers 3, 4, and 5 here. You'll have to manually enter those. Also, I just want to note, you do have to consent to this direct data exchange, even if you didn't file a tax return. Everybody has to consent. Whether you did or you did not file a tax return. Okay, so I've talked about it so much now. Hopefully it hasn't been too confusing, but now I want to show you the FAFSA. I want to show you the pieces that the federal government has provided us, because I think that makes it just a little bit easier to understand. Okay, so when the FAFSA goes live, when it launches, students will go to fafsa.gov and they will log in with their FSA ID and password. Okay, they'll get to this landing page and they will start a new FAFSA form, the 2425 FAFSA. Here, they'll select that they are the student. I always recommend that the student logs in as themselves. I know that parents can technically complete the FAFSA on behalf of their students, but now with the whole consent process, students are still going to have to give that consent anyway. So it just makes it easier. It makes it easier when we have to do FAFSA corrections at times and complete verification, which is like an audit of the FAFSA. Sometimes schools will have to do that. It just makes it easier if the student fills it out. So the student will click, I am the student, and then they will go through the onboarding process. So a video explaining what the FAFSA is, explaining contributors, because obviously this is new for everybody, explaining how to invite contributors, what to expect with consent, and then after submitting the FAFSA. So this goes over what the usual process is, which I have this mentioned in another slide a little bit further into the presentation, but I do just want to quickly mention the federal government has said that even though the FAFSA is going to be available to students and families to fill out in December, schools will not start to get, and the state also will not start to get FAFSA data until the end of January, early February at the earliest. So that means that we don't know what you put on the FAFSA until late January, early February. So obviously we can't provide you with aid offers until we know what you've put on the FAFSA. And because everything's changing, just like it's changing for you, it's changing for us. So we can only prepare as much as the federal government allows us to, as much as they tell us to now. So of course, all of our processes, and this is all schools, are going to have to change. So you can expect delayed aid offers for sure. But typically the process is once schools start receiving that information, Your FAFSA will be processed within 1 to 3 days. You'll receive a FAFSA submission summary, which includes your SAI, and some estimated aid eligibility, and then schools will use your SAI to determine your aid offer. Okay. Once you're done all that, you're going to start the FAFSA form. It'll go into student identity information, which any information at the top, name, date of birth, social, email, and phone number, you cannot change within the FAFSA. That can only be changed within your FSAID studentaid.gov account. But your address can be changed, so you can input your address here. State of legal residence, something I do like to mention also, there are so many times where I have seen students or parents accidentally check a different state, and it makes it very difficult on the state side. You have to be able to prove residency for 12 months, which for some people that might be easy if you have a driver's license or something, but there are cases where somebody doesn't have a driver's license or ID or any bills in their name. I've seen that several times actually. It makes it very difficult to prove. So just that little mistake can be almost detrimental sometimes. So make sure that you're double checking all of your answers is really my point here. Okay, so once you enter that, it's going to ask you to provide consent. And this is a little itty bitty screenshot of a very, very long disclaimer explaining what consent is. Basically, it's just saying that you give federal student aid and the IRS permission to communicate, and for the IRS to transfer your data into the FAFSA. So this just skips all of that and goes down to the very end. The way that you consent is just click approve. So super, super easy here. Next, we'll get into personal circumstances. So it's going to ask for the student's marital status. And keep in mind, all of these questions are asked for a purpose. They do something to determine aid eligibility. Students' college or career plans will be asked, and if they have a first bachelor's already, which of course high school students would not, most likely. Other personal circumstances. These are known as our dependency questions. So if a student can answer yes to any of these questions, they'll be considered independent for financial aid purposes. They will have to prove the circumstance. So say they select that they are in a legal guardianship, they will have to provide documentation to the financial aid office to prove that they are in fact in a legal guardianship. And then once the documentation is reviewed and it's approved, then they would be considered independent. And by independent, you wouldn't have to provide parent information. Other circumstances, they'll ask homelessness questions. Unusual circumstances. So the federal government does realize that there are sometimes unusual circumstances where a student can't just check the independent question or the, dependency questions. They can't answer yes to any of those, but they may meet a different piece of criteria that should make them independent. So any student experiencing an unusual circumstance would be if they left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, they're abandoned or estranged by their parents, have refugee or asylee status, and they're separated from their parents, or their parents are displaced in a foreign country. They're a victim of human trafficking. If they're incarcerated or their parents are incarcerated and contact with the parents would pose a risk to the student, or are otherwise unable to contact or locate their parents. Anybody that can answer yes to any of those would select yes to this question, that they have an unusual circumstance. Again, the student will have to provide the school with documentation, and each school as well. So each school that receives the FAFSA and that they're considering, they'll have to provide them with documentation to be able to prove the situation. So disinterested third-party statements, police reports, different things like that to be able to prove the situation. Something that's new is previously, if a student selected yes to one of those questions, they would have to provide the school with documents before they would get a financial aid offer. Their FAFSA would technically be rejected until the school went in and approved everything. So now the federal government is asking that schools provide a provisional aid offer. So students who answer yes to one of those questions will receive a provisional SAI. They'll be able to fill out the FAFSA as an independent student. And then schools will get that information and they will ask then for documentation. However, we will give you or the student a provisional aid offer. So an aid offer based on the information they put on the FAFSA. This is by no means final. It's just to give the student an estimate of what they could be eligible for as long as they're were able to prove their situation. So once documentation is submitted, if everything goes through, then the student would be considered independent and would get a final aid offer. Where if the situation cannot be proven, then we would revert back to the student being a dependent student, and they would have to provide parent information on the FAFSA. So with that, if you fall into one of those categories, please understand that that provisional aid offer is not final. So you still have additional steps to take, which of course it will be clearly noted that it is provisional. Okay, for any dependent student who doesn't meet any of the independent student criteria, who doesn't have an unusual circumstance, their parent just refuses to put information on the FAFSA to give their information. They can apply for an unsubsidized loan only, so they wouldn't be eligible for any need-based financial aid. It would just be a small loan from the federal government. What they would do is select yes here. They wouldn't have to put parent information on the FAFSA, and they would work with the school to get something from a statement from the parents to say that they refuse to provide their information, and then we could process an unsubsidized loan for the student. Okay, so in this case, this student didn't meet any of those criteria. They are a textbook dependent student. So next, the FAFSA is going to ask parent questions. What I think is really, really great about this new FAFSA is it uses a lot of scenario-based learning techniques to help identify who the parent is or who the parent of record should be. So it's going to ask something like, are the parents married to each other? Depending on how the student answers that question, will frame the next question and so on and so forth. So it really helps kind of explain who the parent on the FAFSA should be in an easy way to understand. But I am going to go over that now because all situations are different and it can be confusing. Which is the parent that you're supposed to put on the FAFSA? Okay, so parents who are married or unmarried and living together, both biological or adoptive parents are reported on the FAFSA in these cases. So if parents are married or they're unmarried and living together, both will be reported on the FAFSA. Okay. Parents are divorced or separated. This is where it gets a little confusing. Okay, so in this case, the custodial parent is reported on the FAFSA. A custodial parent is the parent who provides more than 50% of the student's financial support. If both provide equal support, then the parent with the greater income or assets is reported on the FAFSA. But typically it would be whoever provides more. In most cases, I would say it's students and families find that somebody provides more. So that's the parent that would be put onto the FAFSA. So if parents are divorced and the custodial parent is remarried, both the custodial parent and the step parent's information is reported on the FAFSA. The other biological parent's information is not reported. If parents are divorced and the custodial parent is remarried, the parent is the only person reported on that FAFSA. Okay, then once the student answers all of those questions, it'll tell them exactly who they need to report on the FAFSA. So they can go ahead and they can enter their name, date of birth, social, email, and then send the invitation to that parent or both parents, depending on who's required. Like I mentioned earlier, if parents are married and file a joint return, once parent one, who is invited to contribute, does their portion, then they won't have to invite a parent two. In this student's case, I selected that they would both have to contribute, both parents. So they're either in a case where parents are filed separately or married and filed separately or unmarried and living together. All right, then they'll get into demographics questions. These questions are not used for aid eligibility at all. They're just there to collect data to see who is receiving aid and different circumstances. Those students can choose not to answer these if they don't want to. Okay, they'll ask about citizenship status and then parent education status. This question is if a parent was killed in the line of duty. This determines some Pell eligibility for students. So like I mentioned, every question has a purpose. Except for the other questions have a purpose, but they're not for aid eligibility. The ones about race and ethnicity. High school completion status. And then students will have to add their high school. So they'll go in and they can type in the name of the school, and then they'll make sure that they select the school from whatever list comes up and then confirm that, which this is important too. Sometimes students can just manually enter the school and then it doesn't link with like maybe that they didn't put the full name or they abbreviated something, and that can cause issues as well. So just make sure that the school is on the list. And then finances, it's going to pull a lot of information in if there is tax information available from the IRS. So just a couple things that have changed with financials. There has been a reduction of untaxed income items required on the FAFSA, so that is a good thing. There are only a few, when I say a few, it's a decent amount, but previously, untaxed income was a big chunk of what was reported on the FAFSA. So now we're looking at deductions and payments to self-employed SEP, Simple, and KEO, and other qualified retirement accounts, tax-exempt interest income, the untaxed portion of individual retirement account distributions, excluding rollovers, the untaxed portion of pensions, excluding rollovers, and then the foreign income, earned income exclusion. So those are the only untaxed income pieces reported now. Assets, child support received is now considered an asset, so you'll report the amount received in the last complete calendar year. Education savings plans for the applicant only are reported as parental assets. So previously, if parents held education savings plans or something like a 529 for multiple children, they would report the value of all of them on one student's FAFSA, on each student's FAFSA. Now it's just the applicant of that FAFSA. The net worth of any business, not just those over 100 employees, must now be reported. And then the net worth or value of a family farm must also be reported. This includes the value of land, buildings, livestock, machinery, unharvested crops, etc., minus any debts owed against those assets. Okay, so then we'll just have to answer those questions, a few of them manually that obviously wouldn't appear on the FAFSA, on the tax return. Then they're going to get to the college selection section, and you can add up to 20 schools. So they'll search by name or by school code, and then add whatever schools they want to apply to. And you can go back and remove and add schools if you have, 20, or if you want to add more, you just have to resubmit the FAFSA. Then it goes to this review page where you can review all of your answers, and then it shows that the invites were sent to one or both parents, depending. And the student will then click continue, and then they will go ahead and sign their portion of the FAFSA. Just check the box and then click sign. And then their portion is finished. However, they shouldn't be finished because parents will now need to do their sections. So students need to make sure that they're on their parents to do their own sections. If the parent does not do their section within 45 days of receiving the email, then the FAFSA will be deleted, and then the student will have to do everything all over again. So super important for the parent to go ahead and complete this as soon as possible. So this is an example of what an email is going to look like. The parent will say, the email, will say that the student is looking for this parent's contribution to the FAFSA, and it gives them a link to be able to log in. So the parent will log in, and then they'll accept the invitation to contribute to the FAFSA. And then once they click continue, they're going to go through the same onboarding process of what exactly is the FAFSA, understanding contributors, consent, and then the process after. And then they'll go through the same, putting in their address, giving consent, and then answer their demographic questions. So their marital status, for example, and this also helps determine if the student only added one parent as a contributor, if another parent needs to be a contributor also. So if that's the case, then they could add their spouse or partner. They'll enter their legal state of residence. Again, super important for the state financial aid purposes. Their finances, again, will also be automatically transferred to the FAFSA. However, there are certain things that will not be, that they'll have to manually enter, assets and investments and business net worth, things like that. They'll also ask if they've received any federal benefits, what their family size is, which family size will now be transferred from their tax return based on the number of people claimed as dependents on the tax return. This can be manually updated if it doesn't match, though. The number in college question is still asked, but don't get too excited. It's mainly for state financial aid purposes because the states do use this information. This still will not be included to determine aid eligibility. And then we'll just answer these other questions, same as the student. And then they'll get to their section. And then they can review and then sign the FAFSA themselves. Once that's done, the other parent can also do the same thing. Okay, so I know that was a lot. That was a lot of information, but I hope that seeing actual screenshots of the FAFSA did help you. It's in no way complete. There are still some holes in it, especially because one of the biggest holdups in it being available is the direct data exchange. So we're not exactly sure what all of the pages of the FAFSA are going to look like, but kind of gives you a better idea of what you are going to be dealing with. So after completing the FAFSA, like I mentioned, the schools will receive your FAFSA data. Unfortunately, this year, it's not going to be till probably early February. The state is also going to receive your FAFSA data as well. So anybody who is a New Jersey resident who attends a New Jersey college or university is considered for state financial aid programs. As I mentioned earlier, New Jersey Dreamer students won't file a FAFSA. They'll complete the alternative application at HESA.org to apply for state and institutional aid programs. Students can view their state aid eligibility and submit any additional documents requested by the state on their njfans.hesa.org account. New users will have to create an account, but this kind of serves as your hub for everything state to see what you're eligible for and to submit documents they may be requesting. The state deadline for new students to complete the 24-25 FAFSA is September 15th. So you have a long time. I would still recommend doing it now. Obviously, you want to do that. You want to see what age you're going to be eligible for at all the different schools that you're applying to. But just keep in mind, you have to do it by September 15th or you're not eligible for state aid. Okay, just a few mistakes and misconceptions. Not filing the FAFSA because you don't think you'll be eligible for aid. So almost everyone is eligible for federal direct loans. Those are loans that don't require a cosigner or anything or a credit check. They're just offered to the student. So borrowing, unless you're going to pay fully out of pocket, if borrowing is going to be something that you're going to have to do, then you want to file that FAFSA. Many schools also require you to file the FAFSA to receive institutional scholarships. Stockton is one of those schools. Not giving consent for the direct data exchange. So you can skip that part, but like I mentioned earlier, anybody who skips that part, the student won't be eligible for aid. Forgetting to add a school to the FAFSA. This is an easy fix, but you want to make sure that, you're adding all the schools that you're considering, and now you can add up to 20. It used to be 10. Dependency has nothing to do with being claimed on a tax return or a student filing their own tax return. Only certain circumstances, which I did kind of go over a little bit, make a student independent. So if you can't answer yes to any of the questions on the FAFSA, then the student is dependent. Forgetting to check your email. This is also something super important. Obviously, you're going to be getting a ton of emails from different schools and the state and everybody. You want to make sure that you are following whatever each school is asking you for. We're not just checking in to see how you're doing. We're asking you for things so that we can properly offer you aid. So those will be coming. I'm sure that many schools have not been in contact in regards to financial aid yet, but those will be coming once they receive your FAFSA. I do just also want to touch on the CSS profile. This is an online application administered by the College Board. It's used by several hundred colleges and universities, as well as private scholarship programs to determine a student's eligibility for need-based, non-federal financial aid. So in order to apply, students will log into or create their College Board account. Things you might need. So for the 24-25 application, which is open now, you'll need tax returns, including all schedules, W-2s, and other records of income for 2022, records of untaxed income and benefits for 2022, and then current bank statements, records of savings, bonds, trusts, and other assets as well. Domestic undergraduate students may submit the CSS profile for free if they meet any of these three categories. So if their family AGI is up to $100,000, so $100,000 or less, the student qualified for an SAT fee waiver, the student is an orphan or a ward of the court under the age of 24. Otherwise, there is a fee for the CSS profile. It's $25 for the first school and then $16 for each additional school. You just want to pay attention to if the schools that you are applying to utilize the CSS profile. Stockton does not, but there are schools out there that do, and that you could potentially receive additional aid from by filling this application out. So this is what their homepage looks like. You go to cssprofile.collegeboard.org, or you can just Google CSS profile, and then you'll sign into the 24-25 application. After applying for financial aid, which is obviously a huge deal in itself, so pat yourselves on the back when you're all done. Next, you'll have to complete any requirements. So this is just our Stockton portal, but I wanted to use this to illustrate that it's very important to complete your financial aid requirements because schools are bound by so many regulations, and we can't just offer you financial aid if you have something else that you have to provide us. We have to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row so that we can continue offering aid. So you want to make sure that you complete all of your financial aid requirements at whatever schools you're considering so that they are able to process your aid. And this goes for the state as well. And I can speak for Stockton. We email weekly. We email students weekly for any requirements. We also email on behalf of the state, and you'll get state emails. So just important things. So please check your email is my main point. To complete state requirements, you'll log into your NJFAMS account, this is their login page, and you'll complete those requirements there. For anything federal, the schools handle that. Anything state, HESA will handle that. After we've applied, what comes next? So determining your costs. So there's kind of two big pieces, I guess, to the financial aid process. The actual application process, which once you do it, you'll get the hang of it. And then there is the determining your costs and how am I going to cover these costs, right? So now that you've applied, your next step is to determine your costs. The cost of attendance, which is something that I really wish federal student aid was changing with, the new FAFSA simplification changes. They're not. The reason I wish that they were changing it is because cost of attendance sounds like exactly what you're going to have to pay the school to go there. And that's not what it is at all. The cost of attendance includes two components: direct costs and indirect costs or indirect expenses. Direct costs are things like tuition and fees and housing and a meal plan, things that the school will actually bill you for. So you can think of your direct costs as your bill. Indirect costs or indirect expenses include things like books, course materials, supplies, equipment, transportation, and other miscellaneous personal expenses. So these are obviously things that we are not going to bill you for, but they're things that you do need to think about when you're choosing a school, when you're choosing to go to college. It's going to cost more than what your tuition and fees and your housing and meals might be. You might have to drive to campus, or you might have to purchase books. There are different fees that come up and things like that. So just important to know. Okay. I have this in here to kind of just illustrate what the cost of attendance is. So you have your direct costs, your indirect expenses that equal the total cost of attendance. And then you have your financial aid, and the rest of what that doesn't cover, what your aid doesn't cover, is the gap. So when you're looking at schools, you just want to think about how large that gap actually is, right? So school number one has very high direct costs, same indirect costs as another school might. Your financial aid pretty much will be the same. Some scholarships at private schools might be a little higher than state schools. It just depends. And then you have your gap. And then school two is a little less. So the gap is a little bit smaller, and then school three has the smallest gap. So just something to consider, something I like to illustrate for anybody looking at different colleges. You really do want to factor in how much your gap is going to be. Okay, so reviewing your aid offer and then determining your costs. So this is a preview of what Stockton's financial aid offer looks like. So within our aid offer, we go over all of your costs, as well as any free money that you might be eligible for from the federal and state governments, as well as the institution. So you can see there, we total the free money, subtract the free money from your direct costs. And then at the top there, $51.75, that direct net cost, that's what this student's net cost to the university would be. So that doesn't include those indirect expenses I mentioned. So of course, the federal government does require that we add these into the aid offer, and that's where we get the total estimated cost of attendance. So your cost of attendance might look higher than what you are anticipating. Remember, like I said, the cost of attendance isn't just what your bill is going to be. It includes those other factors as well. Okay, next is brainstorming ways to fill the gap. So of course, the school is going to provide you with your aid offer. You're going to see what their costs are compared to what your aid offer is. You'll subtract your aid from their costs, and then you have this gap. So how are we going to fill that? So there are several ways to fill the gap. The first one is reducing costs. Then we have scholarships, saving and making payments, and borrowing. So of course, the first one I'm going to talk about is reducing your costs. So obviously reducing your costs is going to reduce your gap. Consider the following options to reduce your costs. So maximizing your credits, taking, if schools offer flat rate tuition, Stockton offers flat rate tuition. So I'm using this as an example. You can take 12 to 20 credits for the same exact price. So if you're taking 12, you're obviously going to be here longer, and you are going to end up having to pay more. Whereas if you're taking maybe 20, which I don't recommend that for everybody, but some people can handle that, you could graduate a semester, a year early, which is going to save you money in the long run. So other schools also offer a flat rate tuition. So you want to inquire about that, but that's just something to think about. cutting a little bit of time off and saving a little bit of money. And then cheaper options. So is there a cheaper housing or meal plan option? I know that everybody wants to live in the newest and the prettiest housing and have the meal plan that gives you the most. But sometimes cutting those costs can allow you to maybe go to your dream school or whatever the case is. So just thinking about how to make things a little bit more affordable in that respect. And then renting textbooks as well. When I was in college, I was like, oh, I'm going to buy all of my books for my major. And they all sit in my basement and collect dust, and I've never opened them since. Physical books, get very outdated very quickly. So that's just a little insight into that. Try to rent your textbooks if you can, or buy used if you have to buy them. Okay, scholarships. So Mrs. Oves mentioned this earlier, but scholarships are literally everywhere. So you want to apply for as many as you can. So where can we find these scholarships? So those local and regional organizations, for example, your local Rotary Club. This student on the left here applied for a scholarship with his local Rotary Club, and he received a laptop, which helped cover that indirect expense. So he didn't have to put the money out to purchase a laptop for school. There are scholarship search sites. So an example is FastWeb. But I'd also encourage you to refer to the PowerPoint that Mrs. Oves shared with a list of a bunch of different other search sites as well. And you can search for anything, any of your interests or anything like that. And that they'll bring up scholarships that are specific to things that you're interested in or your ethnicity or anything. So definitely check those out. Your high school guidance counselors are great resources. Yours or your parents' employers. So the student on the right here worked at Chick-fil-A, and she applied for their scholarship and received $20,000 to put towards the cost of her education. Not all employers are as generous as Chick-fil-A is with their scholarship, but it's definitely something to inquire about. Any free money that you can get is way better than having to put it out yourself or to borrow. And the schools you're applying to, they might have additional scholarship opportunities as well. Okay, we're coming to the home stretch, I promise. I know this has been long. Saving and making payments. So obviously saving and making payments, putting money towards your education now will save you money in the long run. When you think of borrowing a loan, you think you're borrowing the amount that you're asking for, and then you're paying to borrow, which is what your interest rate would be. So start saving now. Any contribution is going to save you money in the long run. Working a part-time job can help you cover some of your expenses, and then take advantage of any payment plans that schools are offering. Many schools offer payment plans that'll break that large chunk into several smaller chunks. So that could definitely be beneficial for you. Borrowing, which is one of my favorite topics. So many students must borrow or take out loans to help cover the cost of their education. So please don't be afraid of borrowing, just be informed and be responsible. Different types of loans, your federal direct loans, which are offered through filing the FAFSA. There's no credit check or anything like that. They're automatically offered to the student. They're usually not enough to cover the entire gap. But they're offered at what's usually a lower interest rate than most private loans. This year, that rate was 5.5%. If you're in the education loan world, you know that education loans can have an interest rate of, I've seen upwards of 15%, not too much higher than that, but 15% is a very large rate. So most private loans are pretty high. There are some private loans that can have lower rates, so I'd always recommend checking those first. But the point is, the lower the rate, the better it is for you, because you're paying less to borrow the loan. Then there are private or alternative loans. So those would be with like banks, credit unions, places like that. And then direct plus loans. So those are loans that parents can apply for on behalf of their students, and that can cover up to the entire cost of attendance. So like I mentioned, don't be afraid of borrowing, just be informed and be responsible. Understand what interest rates are, understand repayment, and the different terms and conditions of those different loans. Don't overborrow either. So this is something new that I tried to incorporate. So for example, and it's just to kind of get you to understand interest rates. So your total cost for the year are $30,000, but you've received $10,000 in free money. So you're unable to make payments, so now you need to borrow the rest. So you need to borrow $20,000. So I've had students and parents before say to me that they just want to borrow the full, say, $20,000 in a private loan because they don't want to have several different loans. Like I mentioned, those federal direct loans, they usually are not enough to cover the student's entire gap. So it's $5,500 for a freshman, $65 for sophomores, and $75 for juniors and seniors. So I've had parents say that to me, and this is the calculation that I've done for them. So if you do take those federal direct loans, that $20,000 you're going to split. One is $5,500 and the other is $14,500. Okay, $5,500 at a 5.5% interest rate will cost you $7,162.73 over 10 years. 10 years for the federal government is the standard repayment. $14,500 at I picked a medium or in the middle interest rate, 9.9% interest rate will cost you $45,770.67 over 30 years, which most private lenders, the terms are 30 years. You can obviously go less than that, which the quicker you pay it off, the better, but a higher interest rate is still not great. Total to repay there for 1 year, borrowing $20,000 is $52,933.40. Or, so just think about that in general. That's a lot of money. So whatever you can put towards your education now and don't have to borrow, you're going to save a lot of money. But parents who say to me they're just going to borrow it all on a private loan, $20,000 at 9.9% interest will cost you $63,131.95 over 30 years. The difference, $10,198.55. So what I did was I took that private loan, what that would cost you, and subtracted what taking the private loan and the federal direct loans together would cost you. And you're going to save $10,198.55 by taking the federal loans and a private loan. So just something to think about. And I hope that illustrates it a little bit better than I can explain. Okay, pretty much done now. Your next step, you can follow us on social media if you'd like, at Stockton Finney, Facebook, Twitter, or X now, and Instagram. We do tweet scholarship opportunities on there. They're not just for Stockton students, so you can check that out. The main goal of these social media platforms is not really how many likes we get or anything like that. We just want to put good information out there that's helpful to students. We want to make sure that students are informed. So feel free to give us a follow if you'd like. And then here are just some helpful resources for federal student aid, HESA, the state, and then Stockton's financial aid office. Whether or not you're considering Stockton, we are here to help you. We're here to help you navigate the financial aid process. I know it can seem like a bear. It's a big deal. Once you get into it and you understand a little more, each year that passes, it'll get a little bit easier. But I just wanted to put this information there for anybody that needs any assistance or anything like that. Just a few tips and tricks really quickly. Keep price and costs in mind when selecting a school. Net price calculators might not be working too well right now because that methodology has changed with the FAFSA, but a lot of schools offer bill estimators, so those are good to look at. Save as much as you can. Apply for as many scholarships as you can because they really, really do add up. Any scholarship that you get now, you won't have to borrow in a loan. Any payment plan you do now, you can do a mix of all of those different options too. If you get scholarships, if you can contribute a little bit towards your education, put a little bit down for a payment plan, and then borrow the rest. That'll definitely save you money. Have all of your tax documents on hand. Inquire about federal work study or other employment opportunities while in school. So if you can handle working while in school, maybe not your first semester, but once you get into school and you see how you adjust, that's definitely a good option. Renting textbooks, not over borrowing. You can keep track of your federal borrowing history at studentaid.gov. That's kind of your hub for all things federal aid. And then following us on social media for all those tips and tricks. And I want to thank everybody so much for joining us tonight. And if we have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. I see that some people have been doing that. Mrs. Oves has been answering. If there's any now that we want to ask live, we can do that also.
Thank you so much for all that information. That was an amazing overview. And I just want to remind parents, students, guardians, families, you're not on your own in the process. Reach out to me with any questions that you have. And Stockton, true to form, anytime I've called the financial aid office, I get a person that answers my question well and correctly. So thank you for that. Parents, that's your resource as well. Reminder about scholarships. Please, please get on Naviance tonight while we're talking about it. Look at what's there now. it's going to explode exponentially within the next few months. So the winter season is when a lot of those scholarships kick in. Underclassmen, keep in mind, those same scholarships are likely going to be available next year for you. So take a look at what's out there. Take a look at national databases. Underclassmen, you can start registering with those national databases that were that I introduced initially in my presentation. I'll be sending that out again. So you can just click on those links and register. Seniors, you can register with national database and do those applications after you do the state, local, and regional scholarships first, because that's your best chance. And then any residual time you have, go ahead and do the national sites. Also, I'll be doing a Zoom for families closer to when financial aid award letters are going to be released, going over how to read a financial aid award letter and what the actual cost is to you as a parent, and how to compare financial aid award letters, as well as how to appeal a financial aid award if you have an unusual circumstance or a change in circumstance in your family, such as loss of employment or other unfortunate circumstances. So I will be covering that. It's a little bit too much to do in one night, but I just encourage all of you to continue to ask those questions. No question is a stupid question. I received a ton of amazing questions tonight. Thank you for those. There were two that I wasn't really 100% certain about. One was a question about if a parent has a 1099, how are those assets reported and what's considered on the FAFSA? So that was the one question. I did send them an article on that for detailed information on how to file it in the FAFSA, but I didn't know if you wanted to address that really quickly.
Yeah, sure. So 1099s are going to be factored in as like a W-2 would. So it's not an asset. It's considered income.
But not a business.
Not a business, no.
Right.
No, your 1099s, yeah, I see what you're saying. You could receive for something like that. But they'll just be considered income. Business net worth and things like that are separate.
Right.
Those will be assets. Yep.
A lot of questions about who files the FAFSA. I believe that you answered that after they asked that question, and I tried my best and my due diligence to answer. But families, if you're still not sure, reach out. We'll walk you through that and help you discern which parent should file, because that is kind of a confusing part of the process. And also just keep in mind that both parents, if the student's residing with both parents, they both need that FSA ID, and that's something that you can get off this call and go ahead and get the FSA ID. It has to be attached to the parent's social security number and a separate email address, as well as the student needs their own FSA ID attached to their email and their social security number. Those FSA IDs can stay the same throughout the course of their college career. So parents, if you have other children that are already in college, you can go ahead and utilize your same FSA ID for child 2 or child 3 or child 4 when filing the FAFSA. Another question I received that I wasn't really sure how to articulate the answer: what has the federal and state government done to cut down the cost of higher education? I don't know if you want to tackle that, Marielena.
Sure, yeah. To cut down the cost, I would say indirectly by trying to expand eligibility for federal and state aid. So all of the changes that are coming to this new FAFSA, something that I didn't have, this presentation was already very long. So in another presentation that I did going over the changes for our current students, I went into some of the data of what we can expect the changes to the FAFSA to bring. So we can expect expanded Pell eligibility, decreases in your SAI as relative to what the EFC is now. So we can expect to see a lot of increased eligibility for federal student aid. So that is definitely one way that the federal government has tried to cut down on the costs.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see the outcome with the new FAFSA and the changes and how that impacts our students and our families. I received another great question. It doesn't matter the timing of filing the FAFSA. I would say just really be mindful, in addition to the FAFSA, the CSS profile, if your school requires that. I'm just going to pick a school. For example, Drexel has a filing deadline for the CSS and the FAFSA. If you miss those deadlines, you will not be aid eligible. That institution costs over $74,000 a year. So you want to make sure that you're getting in your documents. So just look at the FAFSA website, but also pay attention to your college and university sites. When do they want that FAFSA by? You want to make them happy because hopefully you get more aid as a result. You don't want to go anywhere past those deadlines. Every college you apply to will send you an email to set up an application portal. And in that portal, it will show we're still missing the CSS profile. We still need the FAFSA. We're missing this document for educational opportunity funds. So again, just checking that email like you alluded to earlier and staying on top of those portals, and you will benefit the most. So I wouldn't say filing it earlier is going to make a huge impact, but filing it early and on time is going to make the greatest impact. Unless you have something else to add.
No, that I would say exactly the same thing. The only one that potentially, and every school might handle this a little bit differently, federal work study, not all schools. So federal work study, the way it works is the federal government gives each school a certain amount of money. So there are a lot of students who are eligible for federal work study that don't actually receive it because the schools just weren't given enough money to give it to everybody that's eligible. So for Stockton specifically, our priority deadline is March 1st. Priority mostly for federal work study. It's priority for programs with limited funding, and that is the main program. So filing it earlier is better in a case like that, but majority of aid programs, you just want to meet the school's deadline in a case like that, but every school's is going to be different.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I just wanted to piggyback off of work study. This confuses a lot of students and families. Work study is money that's being offered but isn't earned yet. So you don't want to necessarily take that off of your tuition, housing, and food bill, because the student has to apply for the work study positions, get the work study positions, and actually do the work for them to reap the benefit. So that can confuse a lot of families, and they don't borrow enough and they're banking on that work study. With that being said, work study, if students are offered that opportunity, take it. It's an excellent way for them to get involved on campus, to earn spending money for things, maybe entertainment, things they want to do off campus that they necessarily couldn't afford otherwise. Also, on the national stage, students who are involved in federal work study overall have a higher GPA. I think it's because of their link and their attachment to campus culture and community. It just makes them feel more a part of it. Especially if you're a commuter student and if you qualify for work study, I would 100% jump on that. And it can lead to so many great things in terms of building your resume and your marketability when you're applying for graduate school or full-time employment after college. So, but work study has a tendency to be very confusing and often misleading when you're talking about the bottom line number for cost. I don't see any other questions in the chat unless anybody has any other questions. Just to clarify, the local scholarships that are awarded, they are on a Naviance. Yes, so all the state, local, regional, the non-national scholarships are going to be found on the students' Naviance page, going up to their colleges tab and clicking on scholarship search. Right now, you're only going to see about 7 to 10 scholarships posted on there. But I can assure you throughout the next few months, that's going to build considerably. There's also a search feature on that Naviance scholarship search where you can click on only show recently updated, and that'll put it to the top of your list. So you're not, going through 100 to 200 scholarship applications. You're just going through the ones that you haven't seen yet. With that being said, we encourage students and families to check that list once a week religiously. Go on there, set a reminder on your phone to go back in and check those scholarships once a week because they are updated regularly. And those are the ones, like I said, you have the greatest opportunity to get because there's not as much competition. It's a state, local, or regional scholarship. Whereas those national databases, it can get quite competitive. So great questions. Send students my way if they have questions or you have questions. I believe all the seniors should know where to find me. D102A down the hall from Wellness and the athletic director. Stop in, lunch flex is a great time. Parents, emails, phone calls, whatever is needed. I work directly with all the guidance counselors, so we have a lot of support here, so just tap into that. And no question is a stupid question. Like we talked about earlier, we have so many families that make the mistake of filing the 23-24 spring FAFSA instead of the 24-25 FAFSA, which is what the graduating class, the class of 2024, needs to be filing.
And then it just looks like we have 2 new questions. If there are 2 students, yes, each student has to file their own FAFSA.
Yes.
The consent part that the parent is going to have to do could potentially be used for multiple students. That's something that we've heard from federal student aid, but we haven't actually seen how it's going to work yet. So stay tuned for that once the FAFSA actually comes out. But yes, each student has to fill out the FAFSA. When parents are married and filed joint taxes, only one parent needs an FSA ID to consent to their data being transferred into the FAFSA and to sign it. The only people who will need 2 is if parents are unmarried and living together, or if parents are married and filed separately. And yes, the parent who is invited to log into the FAFSA, you'll have to create your own FSA ID, which you can do those now. And I would highly recommend doing those now. This way, you're not scrambling to do it when the FAFSA becomes available. It does take a few days to match with the Social Security Administration. And until it does that, you can't use that direct data exchange or provide that consent. So do those now. This way, you don't run into that problem.
So I just want to clarify, because that is such a new thing for families, and it's a learning curve for us as well. So if you could just repeat, what parent files the FAFSA if they're married, living together?
Yes. So
Who
if
needs
parents,
the FSA ID? Who doesn't need the FSA ID? Just to go through with the families one more time.
yeah, sure. Okay, so a family where the student's parents are married and they filed a joint return, both parents' information is going to be required on the FAFSA, but only one parent needs to create an FSA ID and to provide consent, and then they'll fill out that part if they are married and filed jointly. If a student's parents are unmarried and they live together, then obviously they're filing separately. They're both going to need to have FSA IDs and to contribute to the FAFSA. And if a student's parents are married and filed separately, then and they're living together, that's also another part, because you can be married filing separately and be separated. So if a student's parents are married, living together, but filed separately, then both parents will need FSA IDs, because basically the consent, when you file a joint return, it's taking all the information from the joint return. But in the case where students have their parents that are unmarried and living together, or their parents are living together, they're married, but they filed separately, it can't pull from the other person's return without their consent. And it needs both of their parents' information. So that's why both of those parents would have to create FSA IDs. So married, joint, only one. Any other situation where both parents are required on the FAFSA, both have to create them.
Yeah, that's a big learning curve for us. We'll figure it out together. And then when a parent's invited to log into the FAFSA, do we create our own account? You can actually create your own FSA ID now. But you're actually logging into the same account as the student. You just can't see the student's answers. You can only see your answers. So it's actually the same FAFSA, but it's limited access to the FAFSA, if that makes sense. I hope I answered that question right.
You did, yeah. That's
yeah.
good.
I wasn't sure if I was understanding the question.
Yeah. Just for the last question, just to reiterate, so everybody can create their FSA ID today, except parents without Social Security numbers. They have to wait until December when the FAFSA actually launches. Everybody can create theirs today. You want to have it now. This way, when the student logs into the FAFSA and invites the parent, they can just automatically log in. It's not an invite to create an FSA ID. If you don't have
Correct.
one, then you can do it at that time. But it's not an invite to create the FSA ID. It's an invite to contribute to the FAFSA. So everybody wants to make sure they're creating their FSA IDs now. This way, everything's all set up for when the FAFSA becomes available, and you can just go ahead and do each of your sections.
Well, I think we covered all of the questions. I thank you to all the parents, the students, guardians, whoever's the contributors that logged in to learn about the various changes that are going on. We're learning them with you. It can be overwhelming at times, but if we don't have the answer for you, we will get you the right answer. So don't hesitate to reach out. Scholarships, get on it, apply for as many as you can. Once you narrow down your list of colleges, if you know where you want to go, if you have it down to 2 or 3, we can help you walk through that process of talking to them about aid and where you could access additional scholarships. Reach out to your admissions counselors, ask if there's additional scholarships you can apply for at that institution. If they say no, it wasn't a waste of time. It's just, you have the answer now. But exhaust all of your resources. Get on Naviance once a week, check the national databases if you have residual time. And of course, talk to your school counselor and myself if you have questions about that process. Well, thank you, everyone. I know it's getting close to the holidays and very, very busy time. So thank you for logging in. I hope it was helpful. And again, reach out if you need any support or assistance.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.